Imagine you are inside a tiny metal capsule 100 miles above the Earth. You are weightless. You are strapped to a seat. The entire spacecraft is the size of a small car. Something drifts past your face, a golden sphere, perfectly round, floating silently. What is it? A drop of your own urine. How is that possible? You reach out to catch it, but your fingers shatter it into a dozen smaller droplets. Now they are everywhere. Could you stay calm? This actually happened. It happened to astronaut Gordon Cooper in 1963. At the time, the official explanation was simple. A urine collection bag had leaked. Engineers said they just needed a better bag. But the real answer is far stranger. Why did a single floating sphere force NASA to spend $30 million on a toilet? Because it triggered something ancient, something buried deep inside you. A toilet in space should be simple, right? Zero gravity means everything floats. But you already know that. So why was it so hard? NASA had already solved much bigger problems. They had built rockets that could escape the atmosphere. They had calculated trajectories to the moon. A waste container should have been easy. Yet it wasn't. What went wrong? The astronauts did not react like rational engineers. They felt something far more powerful. What did they feel? Pure, primal disgust. Where does disgust come from? Your ancestors, 500 million years ago, lived in a world full of invisible threats. A world where a single touch could mean infection, where the smell of rot meant death. What saved them? Evolution gave them a visceral reaction to potential contaminants. That reaction is called disgust. Have you ever recoiled from a bad smell without thinking? That is your ancient brain protecting you. The evolutionary biologist Valerie spent her career studying this. She called it the behavioral immune system. What does that mean? It is not a conscious thought. It is a silent alarm that triggers before you can even form words. It makes you flinch when you see a cockroach. It makes you gag when you smell spoiled milk. Why does it feel so automatic? Because the software is 500 million years old. And in space, that alarm becomes deafening. Can you imagine why? Gordon Cooper's mission was Faith 7. 34 hours sealed inside a capsule. For urine, he wore a condom-like sheath connected to a bag. No seat. No privacy. What happened? The bag leaked. A perfect golden globule appeared in front of his face. Cooper later wrote about it in his autobiography, Leap of Faith. He tried to grab it, but it shattered into 100 smaller droplets. Now they were everywhere. What would you do if you were sealed in a small room with your own urine floating past your eyes? You could not open a window. You could not step outside. The disgust reflex had no escape route. Why does that matter? Because disgust is not just unpleasant. It hijacks your mind. It makes you unable to focus. It triggers nausea. It can even cause panic. For an astronaut piloting a spacecraft, what is panic? A potential mission killer. After Faith 7, what did NASA understand? A space toilet is not just a container. It is a psychological shield. It must not only capture waste. It must make the waste disappear from the astronaut's reality. It must convince that ancient brain that the danger is gone. How do you convince a brain that doesn't listen to logic? The Apollo program tried to improve the bags. Urine went into a cup and dumped overboard. But feces were still collected in a sticky bag. The astronaut had to knead in a bactericide. How long did that take? 45 minutes. And the bag could still leak. On Apollo 10, what happened? A floating turd drifted through the cabin. Commander Tom Stafford called out for a napkin. Can you imagine the panic in that moment? That single floating turd confirmed what Gordon Cooper's globule had hinted. Zero gravity waste is a psychological emergency. So when NASA designed the space shuttle, how much did they invest? $30 million for the waste collection system. Was that just for suction and storage? No, it was to build a machine that felt like a normal toilet. Why did that matter? Because the ancient brain needs ritual. It needs a familiar posture, a seat, a lid, a flush sound. Did those things actually help with physics? Not at all. They helped with the mind. Astronauts trained on a prototype with a camera pointed at their body. They had to align themselves over a 4-inch opening. How humiliating was that? Extremely. But the alternative was to trust a bag again. And after the golden globule and the floating turd, who could trust a bag? Now look at the newest space station toilet. The Universal Waste Management System cost $23 million. What did that money buy? A quiet fan, a curved seat, a privacy curtain. None of those are required by physics, so why include them? They manage the disgust reflex. They create a bubble of normalcy in a tin floating in the void. The psychologist Paul Rosen proved just how irrational disgust is. He once shaped chocolate to look like dog feces. Would you eat it? Most people could not, even knowing it was pure chocolate. Why not? Because your brain cares about shape and context more than sterility. In space, the context is already terrifying, so the toilet must be a place of Earth-like safety. You will probably never float in a Mercury capsule. But does that mean this ancient reflex doesn't control you? Have you ever avoided a subway pole after someone coughed? Thrown away food that touched the floor? Felt dread in a public restroom with a broken lock? Why does the thought of a floating urine ball in your kitchen ruin your day? The same 500 million-year-old alarm is ringing. Gordon Cooper landed safely in 1963. The Golden Globe never threatened his body, but it imprinted on the minds of every astronaut since. It forced NASA to spend $30 million on a toilet that feels like home, not for physics, for your brain. Because your brain needs a lie, the lie that a flush makes the danger disappear. Today, when you sit on a familiar seat, you are performing an ancient ritual. You are calming a brain that still thinks it lives in a forest. You are still in that capsule. A golden sphere is still floating in front of your face, and you are still trying to catch it before it shatters. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel. A new story every week.